Hi, Rob Aubrey here with WantMoreLeads.com. This is a insider training video. This is our part two of our special edition of the NAR Settled Now What. So the first thing I want to talk about is, because we're going to go over some of the forms updates that have been done here in Utah. I'm assuming some other states have something similar. But the first thing I want to talk about is, number one, is that as part of the settlement, it says buyer broker must have a buyer sign an agreement. Nowhere in the settlement does it say you have to have a buyer agency contract to go show a house. So you have to look at it this way. Showing a house is what's called a licensed activity. Okay. So under the legacy system, you could show houses as an agent without an agency because you weren't performing agency duties yet. So agency came in when you were writing offers and you actually represent them and you owe fiduciary. But in my opinion, you don't even want a fiduciary when you're just meeting somebody for the first time and you're showing houses. So Washington County came out with a showing, like a limited service showing agreement. Zillow has one called a touring agreement. And I think, just meeting somebody for the first time, say, yeah, let's just sign this touring agreement or showing agreement. I'll show you a couple houses. And what it says in that agreement is, these are the things I'm going to do. And you don't owe me any money for showing these houses. Then you say, look, because, you consider it lead generating, right? And, when I was an agent on the street many years ago, I would just meet with people, at a house and then build rapport, schedule an appointment to get them to sign a buyer agency. Well, we can't do that now. You have to have an agreement. So rather than trying to get a whole full forced fight, and hey, let's face it, I may not want to enter into a fiduciary agreement with these people. After meeting them and showing them a couple of houses, I may decide, hey, I'm not a good fit for you. So, or you're not a good fit for me, whatever. We're not a good fit. So I may just want to have a showing agreement. And so that says my duties are limited to showing you homes and you owe me $0. And so that's it. And then if you like them, and they like you, schedule an appointment to sit down and go over a buyer broker agreement. So now I'm going to go in, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through different contracts with you. Some of the updates. We have the exclusive buyer broker, exclusive right to sale. There's been some changes to the REPSI. We have the broker to broker compensation. So we have some documents that I want to go through and point out some of the changes and some of the things you need to be aware of. So I'll share my screen real quick. And so here's the exclusive buyer broker agreement. So this here just gives you a breakdown where you can do county or cities. You can do a specific property. So you can just do that with a buyer broker agreement. It's got the beginning and end, the parties. And then here's a checkbox. The buyer does have a representation agreement with another brokerage. And if they do, and you say, okay, and, so you can exclude properties from this agreement if they have in other words, if they have an existing agreement, then they can enter into one with you and you can exclude properties. Let's say they have one for just, 4 properties and that agreement's still in force, then boom, you can exclude those properties. So that's a major change down here. And so now you have to be careful. So let's say you do a very short period contract, say 3, 4, 5 days a week, whatever, 2 weeks. And then, you have your protection period for X amount of months. However, it says right here, unless the buyer is obligated to pay a brokerage fee on such acquisition to another broker on another buyer broker agreement entered into after the expiration or termination date of this. So if you have a short document or a short contract and it expires and they enter into another agreement, so any of those properties you had during your protection period, that protection period is now gone. So I need you to be very aware of that. Okay. So that one's there. So now let's look at the ERS, right? So notice it says here, seller brokerage fee, where before it used to just say brokerage fee. And then whatever amount you put in here was the total. And then whatever amount you put down below was how much was the amount out of this amount that you would share. Now they're separated. seller's brokerage fee. So you put in there what you're expecting to get on your side, and then whatever you put down here, this is an authorization to advertise. It's not in there. This is not a unilateral offer anymore. So the company is authorized to advertise or otherwise communicate that the seller or the company is offering to pay compensation. So you can put in an amount in there, a dollar or a percentage, and then just say, but it's not necessarily a unilateral offer anywhere. So if you put X amount in there and then they come in less on the, let's say they send a Repsy over with less amount in there, then you don't owe this amount. The seller saved money, right? So compensation, because here's what it says. Compensation between the company and the buyer brokerage. In the event the company agrees in a written compensation agreement to pay a buyer's brokerage, the seller agrees that that payment amount will be added to the brokerage fee referenced in 2.1. So this is the seller compensation. This is the buyer compensation. They've now separated them. If you have an unrepresented buyer and you want to, you expect to get both sides, well, you're going to have to modify your contract, or you're going to have to do limited agency and then have a buyer broker agreement with the buyer and do limited agency. They both have their pitfalls. We're not going to go deep on that today. Okay, so that's that. So now here's the Washington County document that shows you can do something. You know, it's just a showing agreement, no representation right now. You know, you're a customer, not a client. It's clear on what that is. You know, you're going to show homes, you know, will not receive compensation for any source. So on this agreement, that doesn't mean if you enter into a buyer agency and write a contract for them, that this is a different agreement. They're separate agreements. So Washington County will license this for $500. Or you can pay an attorney and have them write your own. So let's look at the real estate brokerage compensation. This is kind of your broker to broker compensation. So you fill in a box. Boxes, you know, who you are, who they are, buyer and seller's name, the dates and that kind of stuff, and then how much you're willing to pay them. And then you can send that over. They both parties sign it, you know, and then now you have an agreement between the two brokers. Okay, that you're going to pay them as a listing broker. You're going to pay the buyer broker. Now it has signatures for the buyer and the seller, but this is an acknowledgement. It's not required to make this a contract. Okay, so that's not required to make it a contract. Now it would be good to get that signed, and then so then by signing this agreement, and here's a big one, right? Because remember, not everybody. We're going to have non-realtors sending you offers, because prior to that, you had to be a member of that particular MLS to have a contract to get the buyer broker compensation agreement. So, but because that doesn't exist in the MLS, so that you don't need to be a realtor anymore to cooperate. Two brokers can cooperate, but we have to have a set and written agreement. So so when it was two realtors, you automatically, if there was an argument, you went to arbitration. That was just part of our agreement. So if a non-realtor, so by signing this agreement, any non-NAR members consent and agree to participate in arbitration under NAR manual. So that's an interesting one. I like that one, because if you have a non-realtor, let's get them into our arbitration, right? And this is the real estate brokerage payment addendum. However, this is now incorporated into the Repsy. So now let's go down to that section 4.3E, so and F. So real estate broker compensation, seller's compensation contribution to buyer's brokerage. Seller and buyer agree that seller shall contribute blank percent or blank dollars to buy. This is or, everything else was and, right? So when you go to these other documentation, oh, this one's or. So some of them had, this one has and, this one has or, right? So let's go back to the Repsy. So you can put a percentage in there, and then, you know, and you don't need the addendum. It's built right into the Repsy now. So, but here's the thing. This payment shall be made in addition to any other compensation agreed by the seller's brokerage to buyer's brokerage. So let's say you have this document signed for X amount, and let's say you agree, let's say your seller's agreeing to pay X amount of dollars, but a buyer broker has an agreement with their buyer that the buyer's obligated to owe them more. So then, so then the buyer is going to come over here, and the buyer, and they're going to put in the full amount that's owed to the buyer broker from the buyer. They're going to put that in here, but this is saying that they're combined. So you could wind up owing whatever is in here plus what's in here. So you have to be clear that if they're putting money in the purchase contract, that it's the total amount that you're agreeing to or the difference. But if you have a total amount here and you still have that buyer broker to broker contract in place, you could wind up owing both. Okay. So, but there's a clause that says buyer's broker shall not exceed the amount agreed. But who's to say they're not, the buyer and the buyer broker get together and say, hey, we got an extra money coming to us. Let's enter into a new agreement, and so we can collect that. And so buyer and seller, authorize and direct escrow closing to withhold. So this is easy. If it's here, then the title company has clear instructions. If it's a zero here, then you want to make sure you send this agreement over to the title company, because these are your instructions now to title. Okay. So any thoughts, if you have any thoughts or questions on that? So those are some of the big things to watch out for, that you don't enter into an agreement where you owe this contract and you owe this contract. Okay. So just be careful of that. If you have any questions, just go ahead and reach out to me, and be glad to help you out any way I can. Thanks. Make it an awesome day.